speaking of getting paid, the Dolphins showed Tua the money. A 4-year, $212 million contract extension with $167 million guaranteed. Tua led the NFL in passing last season while setting a career high with 29 touchdown passes. Chris Canty is having a hard time with the move, guys. Take a listen.
The guy is 1-6 last year against teams with a winning record. Overall, against teams with a winning record in the National Football League, he's 7-14, 60% completion percentage, 225 yards a game, 28 touchdowns to 18 picks, and an 84.3 passer rating. That's not $53 million a year and 167 guaranteed. And you say they had to pay him. No, they didn't. They had the fifth-year option at $23 million. You had a franchise tag that next year probably would have been around $40 million. You could have franchised him after that for 20% more. I mean, you could have played out the string with Tua Tagovailoa. You could have collected more data points to make a more informed decision because based on the sample size that we have right now, he's not worth what you're paying him.
All right. Oh, Harry joining the party. How we doing? Good to see you. Neek's back. We got the whole crew. What's your reaction to what Chris Canty just said? I mean, we just had the conversation about Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes and keeping talent around so they could keep winning. What do you think about Tua being next up and making all that money?
Yeah, I got a lot of love for Chris. I just think the way that he, in the context that he used talking about Tua was a little bit ridiculous. Last year, or Tua with Mike McDaniel, 27 points a game as an offense, 388 yards. You're talking 6.5 yards per play. I mean, 25 teams in the league would kill for an offense in that regard. And I understand it's not just Tua, but this is a very intricate offense that you got to operate as a quarterback with all the moving parts and the motions and the shifts and the way that you got to play on time and ball out and ball placement to those speedy receivers. That matters. And I've said this, I don't think there's 5 guys in the league that are going to go into that offense and operate it the way that Tua does. Not that he's better than them, but the way that it's operated. The thing that got me the 2 points that really bothered me in regards to Chris was, well, you're not going to win with a guy like that playing quarterback like that. I called the Monday night game last year in, I think, late November, early December, when the Dolphins were like 10-3. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC, and they were playing the Titans, and in that game, they lost their starting center. I think they lost another offensive lineman. Tyreek Hill got banged up, and they lose the game. That was the stretch that started the Dolphins' downfall last year. They were the 1 seed, and they didn't not become the 1 seed any longer or stay the 1 seed because of Tua's play. They got absolutely decimated by injuries on both sides of the ball. That's the reason why. So to sit there and say you're not going to win, dude, they were the 1 seed in a conference that we all know is loaded. And then the second thing was Chris made the comment, well, you're not top 5 at his position in the conference. It's because the conference has Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, C.J. Stroud, Lamar Jackson. We're talking about one of the greatest ever, if not the greatest ever, historically great, 2-time MVP, historically great, and historically great. Their names are literally in the history books of the NFL. So to sit there and say, like, he's not top 5, that's because those top 5 guys right now are just ridiculous. So I think this is a no-brainer for Miami. Now, if you want to tell me hesitation because of injury, we could have that conversation, all that. But performance and play-wise, this was a very easy decision for the Dolphins to make.
Yeah, I would say this about Tua, Dan. What I love about him is that he plays on schedule, he plays on time. He gives those wide receivers the ability to have the yards after the catch. You talk about timing, it's everything in the NFL, especially amongst that offense. But I can't ignore the 7 games versus the playoff teams going 1-6. What I also can't ignore is the injury history with Tua, right? I would like to see him another year healthy, being able to thrive in this offense like we've seen him a year ago, which was masterful. And I understand that, I get it. But also I think something that stands out to me is that in their losses, it's not like Tua was the best player on the football field, because he wasn't. And I look at a game versus the Philadelphia Eagles early on when they were down 7 in the fourth quarter. They needed Tua and their quarterback to make plays from the pocket. Tua wasn't able to do that. He got the ball late in the fourth quarter. I look at the Buffalo Bills game last year to seal up the division. He had the football in the fourth quarter with the game on the line. He wasn't able to do that. That Monday Night Football game that you just mentioned, he wasn't the best quarterback in that game. That was Will Levis. But he got the ball in the fourth quarter down 28-27 with an opportunity to put his team in field goal range, and he wasn't able to do that. And I get it. Injuries are a big part of it. I call the Jets versus the the Jets versus the Dolphins games last year in December. And boy, when you go through the game chart, the injuries piled up. But I would also say this: if I'm paying Tua this amount of money, it's okay, make up for it. Because I seen Joe Burrow do it, but also I seen the Cleveland Browns be decimated by injuries and still had an opportunity to make the playoffs. But you just mentioned that they were 9-3. They had to win one more game than they won last season to win the AFC East that would not have allowed them to go to Kansas City. They would have played at home and they would have played Buffalo again. I'm going to criticize him because when the moment arises and I need you in the fourth quarter to make that play, in which he had multiple occasions to do that in 2023, he didn't do it.
Yeah, I think his development was a little stunted by the way his career was started off the injury and under a regime that didn't seem to really believe in him. Once he got with a coordinator and offensive players that seem to believe in him, we've seen how good he can be. It's impossible when we start comparing him to guys like Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and those sorts of guys. Like, yeah, that's impossible. He's not going to be them. Maybe he'll grow into them at some point, but what we have to understand is these quarterbacks need a chance to develop. And as good as their offense was last year, that's how much the quarterback who's captain that offense is worth. Arguing about whether he should be paid as much as this player or that player to me seems pointless. They had one of the best offenses in football, and the quarterback of that offense was Tua. This is what happens. When you have a quarterback in an offense that's effective, you pay your quarterback the money that when it's time to pay him. And the sooner, we've also learned, the sooner you pay your quarterback, the better off your team will be. If we don't have to look very far over to Dallas to see what goes wrong when you try to mess around with a quarterback because you think he's not great. You get in a situation where your hands are tied. I think the sooner they pay Tua, the better off they would be, even if it doesn't work out. That means it'll be even sooner that you can move on from this decision. If you wait to pay him till next year, you're going to be paying him even more than you're paying him this year. I really don't get the argument against paying Tua. You've made a decision. You got a coach in and players in and had an incredible offense. Why do you want to mess it up because you're trying to pinch or you're trying to cut a corner here or there and save a couple bucks every now and then? Like, it seems like he's the guy in this offense. You pay this guy and you make a run. Maybe you don't win the Super Bowl, but he gives you the best chance.
And here's my thing, Harry, with the whole like playoff record or teams that are a good record. I like a lot of people will take other quarterbacks and say this is the best guy in a conference. He doesn't play well versus those teams either. The 1-6 versus the playoff teams last year or the above 500 teams or whatever, I'm going to rip that to shreds, okay? They were 1-6. 4 of those losses are to Kansas City and to the Buffalo Bills. Out of those 6, another one of those losses is to Lamar Jackson, okay? To Lamar, Buffalo scored 50 in that game. The 2 Buffalo losses, one game they scored 50, Buffalo, okay? They scored 50. And then 2 Kansas City losses, one of them, I called the game, was a fumble return off of Tyreek Hill for a touchdown right before the half. The game ends in a touchdown difference. And then they played in the playoff game when it was like 0 degrees and people were losing like limbs type of stuff, so cold. A lot of quarterbacks aren't going to play great in that situation, okay? So, we just throw out these numbers and sit there and pretend that, like, they were 1-6. 4 of the games are against Kansas City and Buffalo. So, if you're not Patrick and you can't be Patrick, we're not going to pay you?
Well, but here's my thing, though, Dan. We can't help the division that Tua's in. You can't just, you know what, we're going to throw these 2 games out because they're against the Buffalo Bills. So if Tua is your quarterback and you expect your guy to go be that guy when it's time to be that man, then he has to be that man, point blank, period.
Does he have a chance to be that guy? Does he have a chance to be that guy?
That's the way they're paying him, right?
But do you know how many dudes don't even have the shot?
I think he does.
I agree, Dom.
That's the way they're paying him, right?
Yeah, the toughest
So if you're
thing,
paying him that way, I
these
expect him to be that dude.
So the measuring stick that we use in some of these conversations is not fair, as it feels like some people decide that they don't want to pay a specific player, and then they throw up guys like Patrick Mahomes against them. Like, it's impossible. Yeah. If the measuring stick is those guys, and I think that it will be great for everyone to find him. But we forget that Patrick Mahomes came into a very good situation, and he's developed into this quarterback that can elevate people around him, and he was great from the start. But you have to give these other quarterbacks a chance, and you never stand a chance if you're going to keep waiting to pay a guy until he can beat Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen every time. What you want is a good quarterback that will get you in position, you build up the roster around them, and then you make a run. Or you can just keep playing the lottery and hope you'll find Patrick Mahomes in a haystack, which it wasn't even the way the Chiefs were constructed. The Chiefs were paying Alex Smith when they got Patrick Mahomes. You can even sign Tua the way that the Eagles did with Wentz or the Rams did with Goff. If you think Tua's not good enough, that's still not a reason not to sign him. There really is no evidence that makes for a good plan. Keep dumping your quarterback because he's good and not great. You keep trying to develop this quarterback, and maybe you keep your eyes open for somebody else. That's the track record that we've seen work. Time and time again, even the models for the team. When you brought in Josh Allen, it wasn't as if the Bills didn't have, I think it was Tyrod at the time, right? They were playing pretty well around them. It's just not the way that you operate a team. It never has been. Players around them can't develop if the quarterback stinks. It just frankly doesn't make sense for the short term, the long term, this quarterback or the next quarterback to just keep throwing out quarterbacks because they aren't quite Patrick Mahomes just yet.
Yeah, and Dom, I've actually changed my stance a little bit on this because I remember 4 or 5 years ago when Dak was going to the contract negotiations with the Cowboys, and I was like, you don't pay good players great player money. And I've kind of at least pivoted a little bit from being like, well, quarterbacks aren't players. They're individually different. That's just the reality of the world. And more often than not, you are going to have to overpay for a good quarterback because, one, there's not that many good quarterbacks. There's only 14 to 16 good quarterbacks, and there's only 3 or 4 that we sit here and go, pay them whatever you want. And so if we live in this world where if you're not Patrick Mahomes, you're not getting paid, you're not going to pay anybody. But then you're also going to have a world where you don't have a good quarterback, let alone a great one.
But Dan, at the end of the day, and then I'll give you the last word, Neek, I don't even feel like guys getting paid dictates talent or how much a team loves them. It's just next man up. That's what it is. You set the market, the next guy gets paid. So if you have a quarterback, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a top 10 guy.
No, because that
if you
quarterback's
want
got
to
to be
keep
good,
him, you have to pay him.
But they've got to be a good player.
But like Trevor Lawrence set the market at one point.
But they're banking on Trevor being, this is the worst he's going to be. That's what Jacksonville's doing. He's only going to get better.